Welcome to our weekly program, The Inside Story of Chabad in America through the Mindel Archives. Today is before you Tammuz, the Chag HaGeula of the Frierdiker Rebbe, and also the Yom Haledes of the Frierdiker Rebbe. Today is also the Yortzeit, Yom Tammuz is the Yortzeit of Rabbi Nissim Mindel. He was born Beis Nissan. The Stalkus of Beis Nissan is the Stalkus of the Rebbe Rashab, and he passed away Yud Beis Tammuz. She was born. She was given over to the Rabbi. That was his life. So today, L'Kovit Chag HaGeula, I want to share with you a story of the Frierdiker Rebbe that wrote himself. He signed the letter. He wrote. We have the original. And this letter he wrote in 1944 in Hebrew, and I will translate this into English. He wrote this in 1944, written to Rabbi Nissim Mindel. Now, why did he write this letter? So let me tell you the background. In 1944-45, there was a learning group in a dentist office in Manhattan. And that group was given by Alexander Cowan every Wednesday, 8:30. A group of scientists, about 25 people, I think, and the lesson was read to a textbook based on Bible unauthorized. So the Frierdiker Rebbe and the Rebbe were very, very interested in this group. This was the beginning of, adult education in America. And the Rebbe, the Frierdiker Rebbe, sent Rabbi Mindel every single week to attend the class and to give him right away a report of the questions that the people asked. And we will probably do the questions maybe next week. I don't know if we have time today. The people asked, and he was very interested. And every week, the Frierdiker Rebbe said that you should tell the Ramash, our Rebbe was called the Ramash then, the questions that they asked. And so it happened that the Ramash, he wrote down the answers. He gave him answers. We have over here the Ksav. We'll do it. Of the Ramash, the questions, the answers that he wanted him also to participate, to give them the answers. Next week, I think we will do some of the questions that they asked and what the Rebbe answered. One day, Rabbi Mindel came to the Frierdiker Rebbe and he gave a report, and he said to the Frierdiker Rebbe that the class needs a little bit. She felt some enthusiasm, some spark. It's getting a little bit, a little bored. So the class felt up this. So the Frierdiker Rebbe said, if that's the case, you should tell them a story. When by telling a story, maybe that will bring them some chayas, enthusiasm. So the Frierdiker Rebbe sat down and he wrote a letter, and he says, take this letter, read it to them. And that will give him chayas to the class again. And this is how it happened. He wrote it, and this was written by the Frierdiker Rebbe. So some things we know what happened in Russia. I think this letter is the beginning. This is a letter from the Frierdiker Rebbe. I have the Ksav. So now I'm going to do this in English. What Frierdiker Rebbe wrote to tell this class, and this is translated by Nissim Mindel. It's a translation of the Frierdiker Rebbe's interrogation by the GPU in 1921. Okay, so now this is how the letter goes. The Frierdiker Rebbe writes, It was in the summer of 1921 in the month of Tammuz in July, when I, the Rebbe, was invited to appear at the Cheka, Extraordinary Committee, later to be known as the GPU, the equivalent of the Nazi Gestapo, and dreaded no less. I, the Rebbe, was then in Rostov, and the invitation was the customary one, as the Rebbe was davening still in mourning after his father. This was the morning of the Beis Nissen. He was davening at the Omid. 3 Czechists entered the room, armed to their teeth, with rifles, guns, Caucasian knives, and belt of ammunition. Not attempting to disguise their hatred, they went up to the Rebbe, to me, and told him he was requested to accompany them immediately to the Cheka. 2 of the men, the Rebbe writes, were of the Yevestzekia, that's a Jewish section, and the 3rd was a Gentile. When the Rebbe told him he wished to conclude his prayer, the 2 Jews almost fell upon him, trying to tear off his tallis and film. I mean, in those days it was sakone. And were if not for the Gentile companion, they would have forced him to accompany them before concluding his prayers. The Gentile guard, however, prevailed upon them to let the Rebbe, to let me conclude his prayers. Incidentally, I recognized one of the Jews as a native of Shavel, having once come to him for help, and I secured a position for him with a tobacco firm, and even lent him some money to start business of his own. That was, of course, before the revolution. Then the Rebbe continues writing, the Frierdiker Rebbe. When I concluded saying the Les Kaddish, I took off my tallis and film and accompanied them to the dreaded Cheka. I had an armed guard on each side of me, and one walking behind, like a very dangerous criminal. In those days, one never knew whether one could come back alive from a visit to the Cheka. That's how dangerous it was. He was led into a large room where some of 15 men sat at a long table on each side, with 2 men at its head. I was placed at the end of the table, still surrounded by the armed guard. One of the 2 men sitting at the head of the table turned to me, saying, "We are members of the committee investigating religious activity under the auspices of the party. We are engaged at present in investigating the Jewish faith. We had some questions cleared up by Rabbis Berman and Goldberg, whom we had invited here. Now you have been invited to clear some questions with regard to Kabbalah and Hasidism." He spoke in Russian. To the Rebbe. I replied in Yiddish, even though the Rebbe knew Russian. I have already been invited twice before to the Cheka, when I already stated that I would not deviate from my principles, and the man or devil hasn't been created yet who could make me give up as much as an iota. Before I managed To conclude the few words, one of the Czechists present, sitting near the head of the table, picked up the gun lying in front of me. In addition to being armed with a gun, each one had a gun lying on the table before me, no doubt to intimidate these taken for an inquisition, saying, "This toy does away with many principles and opens the mouth of the dumb." "You are absolutely mistaken," I said, "for this toy impresses only those who do not believe, these cowards who have only one world and many gods, to whom each passion is a god, and they are afraid to lose this only world. But as to Jews who have only one God, but two worlds, this toy does not frighten and even makes no impression whatsoever." This is what the Rebbe told him. "We have not called you for the purpose of annoying you," said the chairman. "And let's hear your principles. Maybe we can get together on them." That's what the Rebbe writes, word for word. This is English. "My principle is that I do not wish to hear nor to speak other language but Jewish, even amongst Christians, and especially amongst men who belong to the Jewish people." "How do you know that we are Jews?" one of them asked. So the Rebbe answered, "Maybe I'm mistaken, and not all those present here are Jews. My grandfather," meaning the Rebbe Marash, "could recognize a Jew at a glance even in the street. Once, when he was in Kiev, walking along Krechnev Street, he stopped a young man dressed in modern clothes, clearly anxious to disguise his Jewish origin, and asked him where a famous professor lived. The young man became incensed and said, "How do you know that I am a Jew?" Said my grandfather, "The bris left an effect upon your nose. Now that I cannot recognize by that same criteria, but I still believe I am not mistaken." The first question was that they asked the Rebbe, "You observe your faith in every detail. You keep your heads covered. You wear tzitzis, and so forth. Now all these things you do you do it because of conviction or because your faith and habit?" So the Rebbe answered, "From absolute conviction," the Rebbe said. "If so, convince us also and bring us to the same spiritual level as yours," they said to the Rebbe. Then the Rebbe said, "I am prepared to oblige you, and surely you will give me opportunity to fulfill your request. You will admit, however, that if a student of astronomy is stopped in the street by someone with a request to explain to him the system of the stars and planets, surely the students of astronomy would tell him, 'I cannot explain it to you here in the street right now, but if you really wish to learn, come up to the planetarium, and you will see with your own eyes through the telescope the movement of stars and planets. Similarly, I say to you, if you really want to learn and be convinced about our faith in God and His Torah, come with me to the house of God, put on film, eat kosher, observe Shabbos. Then your mind will be clarified, as well as your heart, and you will be able to understand an ethical thought, and I will surely bring you little by little to the conviction in the truth of our faith and the Torah. So they said to the Rebbe, but first explain to us intellectually, and then he will take it upon, then we will take it upon to observe the Jewish faith. But until then, we cannot accept the religious matters as truth. So the Rebbe answered, you surely know definitely that food not merely satisfies the stomach and gives strength, but even fattens, because it turns into blood and flesh. In medicine, the process of digestion is clearly explained. But suppose someone said, I shall refuse to eat until it will be explained to me how the food turns into blood and flesh. It is necessary to believe and eat and drink first, then go and study medicine if you wish. And so it is also with the religion. This is the letter, and the Rebbe signs this letter. And this letter was given to the group. The group needed a letter. And they spoke about this letter for days and days. And it gave them a chayas, it gave them enthusiasm in their whole class. And they went over and over again. And these words made a profound impression on the people. And this was one of the first adult education classes, and the Rebbe and the Frierdiker Rebbe were very much involved. And in Mitzvah Hashem, next week, I will share with you, written from our Rebbe, the Ramash, some of the questions that they asked, and the answer that the Ramash gave to them. Thank you.